The Department of Truth, issue number 15. So I have a theory about this book that I think is actually going to come true at some point. I'm going to say in the near future when we get a couple more deviations. So the deviation issues of this book are kind of like away from the main story and are kind of focusing on just standalone issues. Like we saw in issue 6 and 7, I think, or 5 and 6, like in that era. There was the deviations and they weren't collected in the trade. So what I think is going to happen is when we get like 5, 6, or 7 issues of the deviation stories, they're all going to be collected in like the Department of Truth deviation collection, which is a great idea because then we can focus on the main story over here. And if you want to read more about just like deviations in there, it's a great idea to do that. So this issue, James Tynion is back, but Martin Simmons is not the main artist. It is a deviation. So David Romero is here to fill in the work, and it's beautiful. It's probably the most different in terms of what they were doing. Again, there was some earlier stuff with the UFO that I think would have a different paper grade if I got the physical edition. And in this one, there's just something really special about it because it's dealing with a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and that is the Mothman. Now, I have actually talked about the Mothman a few times on this channel, surprisingly, and I know enough about the creature itself that I think it just works perfectly for this type of story. And basically, this is just playing with this interesting formula, and I'm not going to beat around the bush here. It's kind of like we are interviewing Dalton Hynes, and he is, the tinfoil hat wearing guy we saw in the earlier deviation stories. He's being interviewed by an unknown person at this point. We have like the information blacked out on the actual report of who he's talking to. I couldn't really guess who it is. Maybe Ruby. Maybe it's supposed to be Hawk. Hawk at this point, I think is still with Cole in like his home. So I don't think what that is. And when it comes to the actual dialogue in here, there isn't any. It's just like we're reading like the reports of what Hynes is saying in this interview that he's being questioned for. And basically it's about what happened to Lee, because Lee's kind of been having some weird stuff going on with him. Where is Lee? We don't really know. And this book pretty much does a couple of weird things. It's about like the origin of the title wild, fiction. And it's like, how do these things come into creation? How do they come into the real world? And it does this in an interesting way where we see Hynes kind of breaking it down. He's like, okay, it starts off with like a necessity for them to be made. It doesn't come from like a place of like historical importance or anything. It's like it's something you don't know or you don't see, and thus it's created. So we do see the myth of the Mothman being formed. It kind of starts in 66. There are reports of this creature potentially earlier, but those could be in any number of things. The basic myth of the character starts in America. Again, this is all about the American myths. And it's kind of like in November 1966 in Point Pleasant. These people are driving. They feel something swoop up by their car. It attacks the vehicle. They kind of try to evade what this creature is. But all they see are these big red eyes beaming down on them. And I love Romero's artwork here because it is just so creepy. Everything's out of focus. It's just bright lights and flashes. And you just see the scarlet eyes peering at you through every single picture of the Mothman. It is incredibly cool. And basically, you see Hynes putting this theory together that, like, with the wild fiction that's being created for the Mothman, it's a lot like Bigfoot, where Bigfoot started, like, you're in, like, the Himalayas, you're in this certain jungle, you are seeing this gorilla that you haven't seen before, and thus the myth of, like, the man and monkey comes together. It's kind of like you're seeing these large birds you've never seen before with these different colored eyes, and you're picturing like the wings of like these moths and these butterflies, and it's kind of like that Batman mythos. They even bring up the Batman mythos where it's like this creature of the night with these piercing eyes that you can see and you can't fully make out what you're seeing. It's just like a large winged creature, and thus the American myth starts of the Mothman, because you are picturing this big creature that's incomprehensible, but it's there in the background just watching you. And there's some great shots of just like a kitchen sink, and you're seeing the Mothman just peering through it. It is beautiful. So, like, I'm going to put up the artwork to see. I'm not going to put up every single page. I think most of the issues so far, they have fantastic art. But this one in particular just invokes something so psychedelic and trippy that it's so cool to see. And then this also kind of comes into play. The idea of the wild fiction speaks into this more like the Man in Black and UFO character, Indrid Cold. And Indrid Cold, for those of you who might not know, is another American myth about this really happy, smiley, slick-haired man who can control your mind. And it's not one was super familiar with. I of course heard the name, and I kind of understood what that character was, but basically it's like this guy named Narenberger is like, his car is somewhere in the middle of the interstate. This guy shows up, does something with his mind and attacks him, and basically it's just like this downfall of this guy because this person in his mind breaks him down. And we get an incredibly creepy page of Indrid Cold here, just looking like a creepy guy, like the black eyes, the big smile. It's terrifying, and I want everyone to see this picture because it is just horrifying and a disturbing man to see. Just beautiful artwork. Like, I'm not familiar with David Romero's work, but this is going to put him on the map if he's not already. Like, it's just so intense and creepy. And basically, following up on these theories and those ideas, it's kind of putting Hynes in his own Men in Black role, where he's trying to get all this information, making himself like a creature, trying to absorb all this information and get it to the real world. It's just kind of an interesting thing. So Hynes wants to test his theory about the Mothman. He wants to find, like, okay, where is this wild fiction? How can we track it? And basically, this takes us to the big tragedy that is Mothman is kind of infamous for being connected to, which is the collapsing of the bridge that kills like 46 people. And basically, Hynes is there. He's with Lee, and they're trying to track this thing. And they're like, do you think it was UFOs? Like, I think people wanted to think it was UFO. I think it was the Mothman, and he's like watching it as something he needs to be connected to. It's like he doesn't feel empathy. He's just watching this bridge collapse. So Hynes wants to go track him down, and he heads into the forest. Him and Lee start attacking this creature with a gun, and it's just, again, amazing artwork, just spectacularly beautiful. And that's when we, like, kill it. They essentially kill the Mothman or neutralize it, and because of that, Indrid Cold shows up. So you see a beautiful page where they're just next to the Mothman, this big intense creature, and Indrid Cold is walking up. And in every one of these last few shots, you do see something in the background that is the UFO, that is kind of indicating that Indrid Cold is the, you know, the Man in Black, the UFO guy. That is, I think that's just a great detail, and it works really well. So basically, what Hynes is confirming here to this unknown source is that Lee was infiltrated by Cold. Like, he went to his mind, he said something to him. We don't know what it was, and we haven't been able to specify that. And that's kind of like the last time we saw Lee fully together. So Lee Harvey is kind of like off in his own world now, and he's kind of like broken. And he's like got this like weird connection to the Mothman because of it. And it's just like, okay, so we know Lee was talked to Indrid. Does that mean he is now connected to the mythos of these wild fictions? What is he doing as a part of them? What is his relationship to the Mothman? All of that. But there's just something weird about Lee Harvey Oswald right now. What is going on with him? What is happening? And then it kind of ends with like this last line, and that's the last time you saw Lee Harvey Oswald before his disappearance. And it's like, yes, sir, I haven't seen him since. And that's interesting, because Lee is in a weird place. We know Hawk's kind of like the betrayer working with the Black Hat, but Lee's in a weird place where he's like, I think we killed the wrong Lee, and that the Lee that we wanted to be alive is the one we killed. And now Lee's kind of disappeared. And that's very fascinating. And again, it's a beautiful end page here where we are just seeing Lee staring at the Mothman. That is so cool. I think something that is overlooked is like the interpretation of the Mothman. It's either just very simplistic or overdone. This is a mix of both. It's overdone, but the colors and line work make it look so simplistic and just mossy and feathery and disturbing that I think it's absolutely fantastic. And if you are having hesitations with this book, this is going to be the issue that makes you go, okay, I see what you're doing here. These deviations, they are important, they are cool, they play with the comic book formula so perfectly and elegantly that everything about this just looks insane, and it is incredibly fun. I am just super impressed with this. This is a lot of work, and I'm just amazed by Tynan's effort to put this much into like books monthly. That is impressive, because not a lot of creators could do that, but he's just like, nah, here's literally like 200 words on one page just about running away from the Mothman. That's incredibly hard, and I really like this issue, and I think this is going to be the one that just tells people, yeah, we're doing something fun here. Lee's messed up. I think Indrid Cold is going to come back, because you do not introduce that sort of character without there being something else to do with him. So, the Department of Truth, issue number 15, I am going to give a 9 out of 10. Now, thank you guys for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, and I will catch you in the next one. Have fun, stay safe, good luck.